Welcome to the Worldshapers, conversations with authors about their latest books. I'm your host, Edward Willett, and this episode's guest, Anne Charles, talking about the latest in her Deadwood series, Timekeeper in Deadwood. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Worldshapers, the podcast where I talk to other authors about their latest books. My name is Edward Willett. I'm your host. I am myself an author. My most recent novel is The Tangled Stars, which came out from Daw Books late in 2022 in audiobook and ebook. It's a far future outer space science fiction adventure featuring an AI-uplifted talking cat who becomes a starship captain. The cat was inspired by my own cat, who is not AI uplifted and will never captain a starship, I hope. And the main reason I mention him at this point is that in today's interview, you will see him, because for the first time ever, he photobombed the whole thing. So watch for that. Shadowpaw is his name, and he also gave his name to my own publishing company, Shadowpaw Press. Shadowpaw Press is very active, as you know if you've been watching these in the past. I usually hold up the most recent books, and I'm going to do that again, although I'm now got 3 more that just came out today as I record this, and so I'm now not going to hold up the ones I've been holding up for the last little while because can't hold up everything I published. But this is the most recent one, most recent 3, I should say. It's a series by Arthur Slade, Governor General's Award-winning author here in Saskatchewan. And these books originally came out from Coteau Books a few years ago. These are new editions with new covers by Saskatchewan artist Elaine M. Will, a comics-style artist, as you'll see, graphic novelist, I guess you'd say. And this is the first one. It's called Return of the Grudstone Ghosts. That one is set in Moose Jaw, and as you can tell, involves ghosts. The second one is called Ghost Hotel. It's set in Saskatoon and also involves ghosts. These are all middle grade books, so they're quite thin. But they're great books. I highly recommend them. And then the third one dips into science fiction territory with Invasion of the IQ Snatchers. As you can maybe see the little robot ants there carrying Nanaimo bars on their back, and the parrot, all of which is in the book very much. They're both humorous and exciting and fun for grown-ups and kids to read, and I hope that you will check them out. It's the Canadian Chills series by Arthur Slade, and they are available everywhere as of today, June 11th, which is when I'm recording this. Also out in just the last month, a little over a month now, since May 7th when this came out, Robert J. Sawyer's The Downloaded, by far the best-selling book I've published through Shadowpaw Press, thanks to Rob being a Hugo and Nebula Award-winning author. This started life as an Audible audiobook original with Brendan Fraser in the cast, and I'm sure that helped with the print sales as well. And it's available everywhere as well. And all of these books are also available from Shadowpaw Press directly at shadowpawpress.com. This one it's about uploading your consciousness into a computer and what happens when 2 groups of people who have done that, one for space travel and one because they're prisoners, get put back into their bodies and discover that in the interval things have gone really badly on Earth. So Robert J. Sawyer, The Downloaded. And also just out is this one by another Canadian author, Dave Duncan. Dave died in 2018, but this was the book he was awaiting edits on when he died, and the editor, Dr. Robert Runte from the University of Lethbridge, was editing for Dave at the time and prepared the book for publication. There'll be a second Dave Duncan novel, a fantasy, called A Corridor to Nightmare, coming out in August, but this one is science fiction. And again, I highly recommend it. Also it has a great cover on it by Jeff Minkovics. So that's the 2 books in the series that have most recently been published by Shadowpaw Press. And again, you can find out about all those books by going to shadowpawpress.com. All right, that covers all the introductory material. Now let's talk about today's guest, Anne Charles. And I have her bio right here. Anne Charles lives in the beautiful northern Arizona mountains with her clever husband, Sam Lucky, with whom she co-authors the Deadwood Undertaker series, which we will be talking about in the interview, her charming children, and incredibly sassy cats. And again, my sassy cat will make an appearance in this interview. After many years in several colleges, she earned her bachelor's degree in English with an emphasis on creative writing from the University of Washington. Her books are character-driven, mixed-genre adventures full of mystery and mayhem, comedy and spice, and whatever else feels right to her. Anne has written a bunch of contemporary award-winning novels and multiple series full of quirky characters with whom she loves to spend time. Right now, as I'm reading this, she's probably frolicking around in another story or running from some creepy supernatural villain she conjured in the middle of the night. Anne has been a member of several writer groups, including Romance Writers of America, Sisters in Crime, and Western Writers of America. However, currently she's hanging out with Novelists Inc. and soaking up all she can about writing and marketing books. Her reading preferences range from adventure to horror to western and mystery, and she loves a good mix of romance, too. When Anne is not dabbling in fiction, she's chatting it up on various podcasts, such as this one, and radio shows, as well as hanging out at various book-related conferences, making new friends, and sharing what she has learned over the years about the writing craft and marketing. So that's today's guest, and let's talk to Anne Charles now. So Anne, welcome to the Worldshapers.
Thank you for having me on.
I always look for connections, and actually we have a rather strange connection in that we both live in parts of the world where the time doesn't change. So
that is interesting. I didn't realize you guys didn't change up there either. I know there's certain areas and states, but I
think Saskatchewan is the only Canadian province that doesn't change, and it's always so whenever I'm arranging these recordings, it's always trying to be 100% sure I know what time zone people are in and what time of the year it is, because I have on occasion arranged something before the time change without realizing that their time was going to change, and all of a sudden I'm an hour off of where I thought I was supposed to be. So Anyway, not much of a connection, but it is a connection.
No, but I understand. Most of my family is they're in different time zones, so when they change, even though we stay the same, I always still have to do the math, to figure out now where am I, in regards to whom.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a pain not changing. I guess I'm kind of from that part of the world. You're in Arizona. I was born in New Mexico, so that's.
Oh wow! Yeah,
that was a long time ago. I won't say how long. So we're going to be talking about your Deadwood series today, but you are very prolific, so there's actually a lot of books we could talk about. But let's start at the very beginning. And tell me about yourself, and where did you grow up? How did you get interested in writing? You probably started as a reader, most of us do. And how did you get to where you were doing this?
Wow. Yeah. And I'm not going to mention how old I am either and how long this has been going on. I was a reader, big reader. I didn't ever really plan to be a writer. I had a lot of big dreams. I went through a lot of careers. One of my craziest was when I was pretty young. Camel jockey sounded pretty exciting, but they didn't really accept women. I went through I want to travel, so maybe I'll be, a flight attendant type of thing. I wanted to at one point be an archaeologist, Indiana Jones, but then I thought maybe that's a little too much writing for me. Ironically, now that I'm writing for a living, and it really started with, I read so many books all through, growing up, very different tastes, from Stephen King to Louis L'Amour to Harlequin romances. So I was all over the place reading, and I just started finding that I wanted a little bit more at the ending than I was getting in several of the books. Not that the endings were bad. I just happened to like a little bit more fulfillment at the end of a story. And so it started with, okay, well, let's, rewrite an ending, and turned into, well, let's just try writing a book and seeing if you can, write something that makes you happy. And it just grew from there. The first one was pretty bad, but I hand wrote it all. That's how long ago it was. And, I did type up the beginning and tried to submit it, and it was rejected, but they were so kind and told me to keep trying. And I was just naive enough to go, okay, and I kept trying. And it was probably about 15 years later that I actually published a book. So there was quite a bit of life and getting, working at my craft and getting better and better in there, and taking classes, joining writing groups, all that stuff that so many of us go through. And the first book wasn't actually the first book I published, of course, which is Nearly Departed in Deadwood, the first in the Deadwood mystery series. I wrote 7 books before that. Some of them I rewrote, but I did so much it was a whole new book. So that was like my 8th book that I'd fully gone
Hmm.
through. That was the first one that went out there, and it just built from there. And I did go back with some of those previous ones I had written that I loved, and spruced them up then as I continued to improve. And that became the Jackrabbit Junction series and the Dig Site series. And then there was another series that just was born a few years ago with my husband, who's been there all along, as the background, helping in so many ways with these books and getting the books out there. And that is the Deadwood Undertaker series, which is a prequel to our Deadwood series, happening back in the 1870s. So Wild West meets supernatural, with a lot of humor mixed in.
There's some similarities in our writing path as well, I can tell you, because I wrote a lot of novels before I had anything published. I started writing in high school, and I just kept plugging away and plugging away, and it was about 15 years after I had started submitting before I actually sold a novel. I'd had some short fiction here and there along the way, and I was
Right.
working as a newspaper reporter, so I was doing all this writing. But yeah, so it's and my first, in fact, it's my high school novel is here on my desk somewhere, the original handwritten manuscripts.
Yeah, no, I have it too. And every now and then I go back and read it and just shake my head.
Yeah.
But like you, in when I was trying to write, we have to have our day jobs, and I had gotten a degree in English mainly because I went from college to college as I moved around, and all the colleges kept making me retake English 101. So I took like 4 versions of English 101 before I realized, oh, I should probably get an English degree.
Or at least
So
English 102.
exactly. So that's why, I ended up getting a 4-year degree in English, and I stumbled upon a tech writing job during that last year. I actually went to get a job as a secretary for the company, and they saw my resume that I was going to college and said, "Oh, you're taking English. We have a tech writer position open. Would you like that?" And I said, "Sure. What's tech writing?" And it grew from there. So then I spent about 14 years tech writing as I was trying to become a, writer. So it wasn't until 2014 that I could quit that tech writing job and just go to full-time writing finally.
My first published book was actually using Microsoft Publisher for Windows 95. I did a bunch of computer books in my when I
Ah,
started actually selling books, they weren't fiction at all. I did a bunch of that kind of stuff. A market that's gone now because people are much more, uh, you know,
right.
understanding of how to use computers. This was at the level of if you want to open a file, click File,
Think
Open.
same here. Same here. It started with that.
I
Very
know
basic.
I know someone who worked in that field who started early enough that people would, when they saw a mouse for the first time and they were supposed to use it, they would pick it up and go like that. So,
That's funny. Yes, and I used to the software developers would give me a lot of trouble because when they would write stuff, to get me started on how to use this, so I could write it for the user, they would use a lot of pleases and in their messages that would pop up. Please do this, please do that. And I used to get picked on because I'd be like, get rid of that please, take that please out of there, get all those pleases out, because when you start doing that, everything's please. You don't realize how much people use things like that. And so I got the reputation of like the killer of the pleases, and all that stuff.
so tell me now, as we move on to the series, how did Deadwood begin? Where did the idea come? And in general, I guess this podcast, for its first 150 episodes, was entirely focused on process, and I still like to put that in there. So it's the old story, the old question you're not supposed to ask of where do you get your ideas, but all the same,
Well,
where
my
did Deadwood come from, and in general, where do these things come from for you?
well, Deadwood started because I had spent a lot of time there growing up. My mom moved there when I was a kid with my stepfather, and so I began to spend a lot of my
Deadwood,
time
South
there.
Dakota?
Yes, Deadwood,
Oh,
South
I've
Dakota.
been there.
Oh, all right. So I had a lot of growing up, wonderful years exploring the Black Hills, exploring mining, going through museums, learning so much about the time period there, all that happened, from just basic mining to the cowboys, the Western aspect, to, all of it. And even before that, what was going on in the hills. So I really had so much, history with it myself. I didn't start trying to write the Deadwood series. One of the first ones I wrote was set down in Mexico. It's the Dig Site series, because I was so enthralled with a Mexican history class in college that I just started writing about the Maya and some, incorporating that, some adventure and archaeology. And then I wrote an Arizona book because I was living in Arizona and I loved some of the old, the Western history of Arizona. So there was the Jackrabbit series that I wrote, or I started. But then I wrote the Deadwood series because I had two kids, or no, I had a kid and one on the way, and I was there. The big mine had shut down in one of the small towns, which was the major employer. And I thought, boy, what do you do when you lose a big, employer like that in the area? How do people survive? And came about with this whole real estate agent, and she has two kids she's trying to support on her own. And just, it grew from there. And all that I had learned, the history, the exploring, all the mines I'd been in, it just seemed to mushroom so quickly because I had all that knowledge in there, right? So it could just be, grow. And I decided, when brainstorming with my husband early on, we decided to incorporate supernatural elements, which really, wow, that opens so many opportunities in a story. It makes it even more fun when you can create creatures and monsters and other beings that aren't quite human, and they all have different abilities. So that's kind of the birth of that whole series. Just a lot of my history mixed in with some wild ideas.
But that's kind of its own subgenre, the weird western, I think it's usually called. There's whole
it's
anthologies of these kinds of stories.
It's fun. And that's what the Deadwood Undertaker series that I write with my husband, Sam Lucky. It's that supernatural mixed with Old West. I grew up, like I said, reading a lot of Louis L'Amour, Zane Grey. So I loved Westerns. But boy, that's a lot of research when you go into any kind of historical. You really got to know, you can't bungle it up because readers are so smart. And they'll say, oh, no, that was not invented until 1920. You can't have that. So my husband's so great at research and loves it that he dug in, and we go to Deadwood every year, multiple times. So we're able to, do a lot of research on site in the museums and the library with the Deadwood History Group. And so we are able to really capture Old West Deadwood, but then add all this supernatural fun stuff mixed in with it.
So the main Deadwood series is set in the modern day.
Correct.
With a recurring character.
Right. Yes, it's a first person only. Violet Parker, we're only ever in her head. And as an author, that creates its own challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's hard, but sometimes it's fun because I have to think outside the box. I can't just hop over in so-and-so's head and let you know what's happening. We have to, figure out how the main character is going to figure this out, and understand what's going on.
Did you plan out the entire series before you started, or has it kind of grown as you've gone along?
It's really grown on its own. I thought way back when, well, maybe a trilogy. And then as I started writing, well, maybe about 5 books. Well, no, maybe it's going to be about 12. And now we're on 14. And, I do have a series arc with some, high level ideas for each part of that arc, what we're trying to accomplish. I have character arcs. So, moving things along, having character growth, I think is important in a series, incorporating all that. But do I have a, final number of, what this will be? No, because anyone who's written, kind of an open series like this, characters appear and all of a sudden we have new things happening that need a whole book to describe. We have backstories that come into play, and so I have a Deadwood short series that are just novellas that fill in a lot of backstory things, things that have happened to the different characters, which is fun too, to kind of develop some of that backstory. But I don't put it in this main series because I don't want to slow down what we're doing there.
One of the things, I've been on a panel with long series writers. The most I've ever written is a 5-book series. I've had a trilogy. I have an open-ended series. It's only 3 books, and it's currently kind of on pause. But even with that, continuity is a pain in a long series.
Ooh, yes.
And the longer it gets, the more of a pain it is. So how do you deal with that?
Before I start, I try to reread the entire series. Sometimes I'm skimming. I mean, book 1, boy, I've read that book a lot. And sometimes I'll skim the high level, just notes. But about book 3, I was at a book signing, and this wonderful lady came up to me, Diane Garland, and she has a business now for this. And at the time she didn't. She said, "Hey, I'm here for another author," who had a big line, of course, and I didn't, right? And she said, "Oh, I've read your books. I really enjoyed them. Do you know you changed a character's eye colors from book 1 to 2 or something? I really think it was 2 to 3." And I said, "No, but now I do." And she said, "I love keeping track of that kind of stuff. If you ever want some help, I'd love to just, help you out and and do some notes for you on the series." And I was like, "Oh, I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you to come along." The sky lit up and everything was like golden for a moment. And that was, whoa, way back in about 2013 that she approached me, and we've been working together ever since. She works with all my series, and she has a OneNote that she keeps track of all the characters, everything I could ever ask for, synopsis of each book. I mean, it's incredible, the
Oh,
details
wow.
she keeps. And, like 5 years ago, she goes, "Do you know you have over 500 characters you've mentioned by name now?" And I was like, "Oh, no," and she has them all listed. So that's been huge, helping me keep track of that, because continuity is so important. When you get a binge reader and they're reading one book every couple days or more, one a day even, boy, you need to make sure your continuity is there, because you don't want to drop the ball on anything.
Yeah, even though it's been months in between those books and you've done a million other things in between them. So,
Yes, exactly. So it is important to try to, I think it's really important to keep all that, from basic eye color to vehicles they drive to favorite foods to plot lines, that you have going. You started back in book 3 and then you skipped a couple books and you picked it up again in 7. It's so important to keep track of all this stuff.
how do you go about planning individual books? Are you a big outline creator or synopsis creator, or do you have a general idea and just launch in?
I like to create a plot outline, just very high level for the, like Violet, the main character, but then the mystery plot, there's always a little bit of romance, because like I said, I grew up reading romances too, so I just like a subplot of a little romance, and a couple of the main characters have plot lines. So I'll go through and I'll do an overall plot line, just like I said, a couple sentences for each point, and do that. I'll do some GMC charts for them, which is goal, motivation, conflict, for each character for the book. I have series ones, but then I have per book conflicts. I come up with a theme and, all that kind of stuff that I work in and try to stick with, because I enjoy the challenge of, trying to write to a theme. And I think it makes each book feel a little different. If this one's about justice, or this one's about nothing ever goes as planned, or whatever you choose as your, basis for each story, I think it makes a big difference, in feel, so that it doesn't all run together and, become stale for the reader. So I'll do all that stuff with this nice, beautiful plot outline that's very high level, like I said, not a lot of words on the page, but then I'll get started, and by the first turning point, I'm totally off. I'm in
Yeah.
a new direction, and I think, well, we knew we could do it. That was all that I needed, that to know there was a story there, and then just roll with it.
Yeah, that sounds familiar to me too. Let's see, I've had 12 novels with Jaw Books, and at this point, up until my editor retired, so I don't know where I am right now, but I was doing it, selling the books from the synopsis, but the finished book didn't necessarily have much to do with that initial synopsis that I would send to the editor. And usually I just start writing, and at some point, if some, maybe, and I'll ask you if you do this too, do you ever go back to that initial idea if you run into a problem and you think, what was I thinking originally?
Yeah. Yes. And usually laugh and go, wow, I'm so,
Yeah.
what was that? Oh yeah, maybe that's a good idea to now incorporate that,
Yeah,
right?
that
Now I
just
better go back to that.
that sounds very familiar. Are you? Oh, speaking of, my cat just rushed against my legs. I didn't even know he was in the room. Speaking of this latest book, what's the synopsis of it? What happens? What's the theme in the most recent book? And it's called. And again, I have trouble reading the black and white. Time for Reaping in Deadwood.
Time reaping. So
Time
one of the
Reaping. There we
things
go.
we do with the Deadwood series is I'll take a title, like the first one is nearly departed in Deadwood, and we actually write dearly, but then cross off the D and put the N. And so every book we play with the word, and it was timekeeping, but then we changed it to time
See, I
reaping.
was thinking time for reaping from the Bible, a time to reap and a time to sow.
Right,
That's why I
right.
keep getting that extra word in there.
Well, it's as Violet's, without trying to give away too much on the series, and Violet's character arc. Um, by this time, is battling with otherworldly beings often, and one of her jobs is to take care of them, throw out the trash, if you will, for those that are causing trouble in our realm. And so she's time reaping, as in getting rid of them, but also she's a timekeeper, which is one of otherworldly jobs that she
I,
landed.
I,
So
I think maybe I'd better move Shadowpaw here. Sorry.
no, I love it. I have cats, so I'm used to just working around.
It's literally the first time I've been doing this that he has bombed the interview, which is
I
not
think
bad for having a cat, but
I think he heard that I have 4 cats, so he knows that. Oh yeah, this is cool.
well, that's
She's used
him.
to
So
it.
anyway, yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. So, and time reaping is just more about Violet trying to figure out what this new gig of being a timekeeper and keeping track, which is basically keeping track of the coming and goings of travelers between realms and watching for the troublemakers coming through. And so that's a job that she's kind of stumbled into now and has no idea how to do. And so it's a continuation of so many of the plots and characters that you've seen in the previous books, but now she's really actively trying, where she before is like, I can't do this, I can't figure this out, I've got to sell real estate, I've got 2 kids to raise. Now she's accepting her role and starting to actually do some of the tasks needed to keep an eye on the trouble that's coming into the Deadwood area and more, in battling it. And of course, Deadwood's a hot spot. In so many supernatural books, you'll find that there's areas where there's vortexes or vortices, I guess is how you say that, or gates.
Sunnydale in Buffy terms.
Exactly. So, Deadwood, she's battling what comes through that shouldn't be there. And she's also wanted. Now she's got bounty hunters coming through, so looking for her. So she's dealing with that as well, and her kids are at risk. So it's just a mix of all that. And like I said, I'm being a little vague because I really don't want to give away too much if you haven't started the series, because all this character development comes book after book after book, as Violet goes from just being a single mother of twins, trying to make a living in Deadwood, to all that she has by book 14, and all that's going on within the town, which is crazy fun stuff.
Is it possible to jump into the series in book 13, or is it really you'd really prefer
Well,
to go back and read the rest of them?
you could. Now I'm a Virgo, so I'd be like, no, 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 no. We're starting at the beginning. That's the way but I do write them, and I give a little bit of backstory to what we're talking about in certain characters. Like if I introduce her best friend, I'll say it's her best friend since, they were wearing pigtails. And just to remind, because I know people take breaks between reading too, and sometimes you don't want to go all the way back. You took a break after book 8, you want to pick up book 9 a year later. So I want you to be able to jump in and give you just a few hints, reminders of who's what, without dragging the story down, down with a bunch of backstory to pull you back. Because those who are binging it don't want to be, reminded in 5 chapters worth of stuff of what's happened. They're like, yeah, we know, let's go. So
Yeah.
it's a balance. That's part of the skill I've learned, is how to give enough to catch you up, or if you're new, to make you feel like it's a full story without inundating those who have, just finished the last one.
Now, this book came out back in the fall, and
Mhm.
but there is a new one coming up in the Wild West Deadwood series. So tell me about that one.
Right. So the Deadwood Undertaker series is the same world as Violet Parker's Deadwood. I mean, it takes place in Deadwood, only it's back in the 1870s, when during the gold rush, during all the crazy rowdy things that Deadwood is known for. If you ever go to the real town of Deadwood, South Dakota, you'll see there's so much history there. There was gold, and gold, makes things happen, brings everybody in, brings the good and the bad, and of course there's the HBO Deadwood series. You know from some of the characters. Well, that was fiction. It was also a lot of nonfiction mixed in. So anyway, the Old West series is called the Deadwood Undertaker series, and that stars Clementine, who is similar to her occupation is what Violet is. And she's in town to clean up the mess and take care of the riffraff. And she runs into a pair of gunslingers that used to be freighters that are there to find their uncle. They're called Sidewinders, Boone and Rabbit, and they're raised together. Parents died on the trail west, so they've been, just kind of brothers, by happenstance. And they're there to find their uncle, who is really the guy that ran the freight wagon where their parents were killed, that basically adopted him. And so they all are coming together, and there's this interesting guy, this old guy named Hank, and he's been around for so long he doesn't even remember. And he just seems to have lucky things happen when he's around. So it's this group coming together, and they're battling some of the things Violet in the current, times has to battle too, because non-humans don't necessarily live the same length of time we do, right? Some live long time, and ghosts. What's kind of fun is we can have people in the Old West that are ghosts in the modern version, and go back and forth. So you can get a little bit of that too. So the new one's coming out, book 5 in that series, called Hip Deep in Bad Company. And it's the crew, and they have more trouble they're dealing with back then. And of course, what's also fun is, in the modern version, we have all these new things we can do. Like you can be recording something on your phone if you need to, or whatever. But back then, it's a whole different game on how you battle something and what you have at your, in your arsenal to deal with strange things going on. So.
And I saw on your website your husband co-writes that with you?
Yes, Sam Lucky. He's been there, like I said, since the start of all this. Just more behind the scenes brainstorming and formatting and all kinds of stuff with the business. But with this series, I knew there was a real opportunity. Book 9 of the current Deadwood, or the modern day series, really had a woken opportunity to start this Old West series with some of the characters. And so he was like, I'm all in. I love to research. I'm ready to start writing it right alongside you. Let's do this. And then I can, we can have this other series running at the same time as you're working on the modern series. So it was perfect timing. And he's just, man, the things he brings in, he comes up with songs for back then. Not like long, but like little ditties that the showgirls are singing, and just so many fun and fascinating things that my brain would never have done, And so we work as kind of a duet together on this series. It's not you write one part as much and I'll write the other as much as you go. Let's brainstorm together. You go first, then I'll come through, and then I'll go through again, and then you go through again. So it was more like that.
And you still like each other?
Yeah, we do. And it's book 5. And there's been times, we do argue. I mean, it's not easy. Anyone that's ever co-written knows it can be tough. But we, whoever feels the strongest and argues the loudest wins. So, and then we just go on. We also raised 2 kids together. They're in their teens. So we've kind of done this on another level. So, yeah.
When does that book come out?
That book, Hip Deep, comes out June 28th, the ebook and print. We do have all of our books in audio, but we are independent. So usually the book comes out and the ebook, and then we go ahead and get the audio book in process, get that started with the narrators that we use.
Audiobooks are expensive.
And they're expensive. Yeah. So that book audio will be out later this year, but the print and ebook is out at the end of June 28th.
Well, that'll be not long after this episode goes live. So this
Perfect.
is good timing.
Yeah.
So you've been obviously found a readership. Have you been pleased with the way your books have been received?
Very much. Nearly Departed, the first Deadwood, I actually had a lot of interest from some big publishers out in New York, and it did really well, editing, all that, but it got shot down by marketing. Long ago, they said they didn't think the Midwest was a big enough readership, the middle of America, which I was like, well, they get off the tractor every now and then. I know, I'm a Midwesterner. We do read books.
Yes.
And so I was determined that this book would have an audience, and went forth anyway, created a small press and went forward. And boy, howdy, I didn't expect how well it would do. And it's been wonderful. And so many readers all over the world, not just the Midwest, all over the world. And it's done very well. And the other,
I'll bet you some of them big city people read it too.
Right? Yes. So it's been amazing from the start. And then of course the other books, it's all one world. It's one, big, I think of it as a big um archaeology complex of different temples that, each series is its own temple, but they're all connected. So you'll see crossover characters in the different series, which is a lot of fun. And readers love that too. Oh, so and so showed up there in this book now. Oh, this is exciting, to see them, and they're related. Characters grew up next to each other, but they have their own series, and things like that. So it's really fun.
Now, I saw on your website a section devoted to sketches. Do you do your own covers?
My brother, C.S. Kunkel, does he does the original art for all the covers. My husband is now the graphic artist that works with him. And then my brother does illustrations. We do about 6 or 7 for each book. And then he'll also do little extra illustrations if I want some marketing material. He'll come up with stuff and go back and forth. But he's the reason so many my covers have a feel, a brand.
Yeah.
It's his art.
Very, very distinctive and very consistent, which is good from a selling and marketing point of view, for sure.
Right.
So what are you working on now?
I am actually working on Deadwood 14.
Does it have a title?
Clocks and Clobbers in Deadwood. I'm sorry. Cops. I do that every time. Cops and Clobbers in Deadwood. Instead of Cops and Robbers.
Cops and Clobbers.
Cops and Clobbers in Deadwood. And then it's a crazy clock caper. I really have a alliterative thing going, and then I still stumble on it. So I've got to work on that a little bit before I start talking
Crazy
about it.
clock caper is not an easy phrase to say rapidly.
No, not at all. But yes, Cops and Clobbers in Deadwood, and that's book 14. And I hope to have that out this fall, September, probably October.
And where can people find you online? Lots of places, according to what I saw.
Yes, I am all over. It's like a bad disease, right? But you can always go to my website, which is anncharles.com. There's no E in Ann, so just anncharles.com, and go to the books and go to, the blog has all my past newsletters and interviews. We keep page of interviews, for each year. And then the book links with all that kind of stuff and information to find out where you want to go. And then you can always go on to different retailers and read reviews and see if it's your cup of tea or not.
Well, and if you are looking at this interview on the web page at theworldshapers.com, you will see that I have links to all of these various social media accounts and so forth are part of that web page. So hopefully some people will follow up on that.
Good. Great.
Well, thanks, Anne, so much for being on the Worldshapers. I enjoyed the chat. I hope you did as well.
I did, and I enjoyed seeing your cat.
Yes, well, I'm going to try to make sure that doesn't happen again.
No, that was a lot of fun.
So thanks so much, and best of luck with the next in this long-running series.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on here. It was great talking to you.
And thanks again to Anne for that great conversation, and thanks to Shadowpaw for his unsolicited appearance. That's it for this episode of The Worldshapers. Just a reminder that you can find The Worldshapers on its own website at theworldshapers.com, where you will find links to the audio-only version of this podcast, as well as links to all of the various social media accounts attached to each of the authors that I interview. You can also find The Worldshapers on Facebook at The Worldshapers, on Twitter at The Worldshapers. I guess that's it. On those two places at The Worldshapers. You can find me at edwardwillett.com. That's the name you see right there, .com. You can find me on Facebook at Edward Willett Author. You can find me on Instagram at, Instagram at Edward Willett Author, Facebook at edward.willett, and Twitter at, X at ewillett. And it's the fact that I couldn't get my handle the same on everything, because I never thought of it at the time I was doing it, that now confuses me, even when I'm trying to remember every place where you might find me. I am also on YouTube, as you can probably tell, since that may very well be where you are watching this, again, at Edward Willett. Also on Rumble, if you want to watch the video in a different spot. I'm probably Edward Willett on there as well. I think that one as well, yes. You can find Shadowpaw Press, the publishing company I mentioned off the top and named after the aforementioned photobombing cat, at shadowpawpress.com. It's on X at Shadowpaw Press, and it's on Facebook at Shadowpaw Press, and on Instagram at Shadowpaw Press. And I would also like to mention this book, which I did not mention off the top, Shapers of Worlds Volume 4. This is the 4th anthology I've kickstarted featuring authors who are guests of this podcast. You can see them listed down the side there. and it's illustrated by Wendy Nordell. There will be a Shapers of Worlds Volume 5, again, a collection of science fiction and fantasy short stories by authors who were guests on the podcast. That one will come out in probably January, February of 2025. So watch for that, and I will definitely be talking about it more as we get closer. That's it for this episode of The Worldshapers. Thank you for watching again, and I hope you will continue to come back in the future as I continue to talk to other authors about their latest books. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.